September 19, 1944, 07:15 hours. Near Ericourt, Lorraine, France. The fog is a cold, wet blanket. It clings to the steel hull of the M4A3 Sherman, muting the world to a palette of gray and softer gray. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of gasoline, oil, and the lingering scent of three men's nervous sweat. Corporal Jack Wilson, the 20-year-old loader, runs a gloved hand over a 75mm high-explosive shell, the metal cool and impartial to the touch. He can feel the low thrum of the Wright Continental R975 engine idling, a mechanical heartbeat in the pre-dawn stillness. In his jacket pocket, tucked inside a waterproof pouch, is a letter from his sister, Mary. It arrived 2 weeks ago, its paper now soft and worn at the creases. It speaks of harvest time back in Ohio, of neighborhood gossip, of a world that feels 1,000,000 miles and 1,000 years away. The letter is his anchor, a tangible piece of a life where the loudest noise is the church bell on Sunday, not the deafening crack of a main gun. He thinks of the photo tucked within it, Mary squinting in the sun, her arm around their golden retriever. He had promised her he would be safe. A foolish promise, made by a boy who had never seen what a German 80mm shell could do to half-inch steel plate. Strategically, Jack's tank, call sign Davy Jones, is a single cog in the colossal machine of General George S. Patton's Third Army. After the breakout from Normandy, they had advanced with breathtaking speed, a torrent of steel and gasoline that had shattered the German Seventh Army. Now, deep in France and nearing the German border, the advance had slowed. The supply lines were stretched thin, and the enemy for the first time in months was pushing back. Intelligence spoke of new German Panzer brigades, hurried to the front, equipped with the dreaded Panzer IV, the Panther. Jack and his crew had heard the stories from veteran tankers. They spoke of the Panther's sloped frontal armor, which could shrug off a 75mm round like a raindrop. They spoke of its long, high-velocity 7.5cm gun that could kill a Sherman from over a mile away, long before the American tank was even in range to fire back. The Germans had nicknamed the Sherman the Ronson, after the popular cigarette lighter, because it lights up the first time. Every time. Jack tries to push the thought from his mind, focusing on his training. Load He for infantry, AP for armor. Keep the rounds organized. Don't get in the gunner's way. Be fast. Outside, a sound cuts through the fog. It is distant but heavy, a low guttural growl, different from the familiar radial whine of their own tanks. It is the sound of heavy treads on soft earth, the sound of predators stirring in the mist. The tank commander's voice, calm but tight, crackles over the intercom. All stations stand to. Something's out there. Jack's hand instinctively tightens on the shell. The promise he made to his sister feels a lifetime away. He wasn't in a duel. He was bait in a trap, and in the fog-shrouded fields of Lorraine, the hunters were coming. The Battle of Ericourt was not supposed to be a desperate defense. It was meant to be a staging point for the next phase of the Allied advance into the German Reich. The tip of this spear was the U.S. 4th Armored Division, a veteran formation that embodied Patton's philosophy of speed and violence of action. Commanded by the brilliant and aggressive Major General John S. Wood, the 4th Armored was organized into 3 combat commands: CCA, CCB, and CCR. This structure was designed for flexibility, allowing for the rapid formation of combined arms task forces of tanks, armored infantry, and self-propelled artillery to meet any tactical situation. The primary weapon of the division was the M4 Sherman tank. By late 1944, most units were equipped with the M4A3 variant, powered by the reliable Ford GAA V8 engine, while many still carried the standard 75mm gun, an excellent all-purpose weapon effective against infantry and fortifications, but increasingly inadequate against heavy German armor. A growing number were being outgunned with the new higher-velocity 76mm M1 gun. This weapon gave the Sherman a fighting chance against the Panther, but it was by no means a guaranteed equalizer. The Sherman's strengths were not in a one-on-one fight. Its advantages were mechanical reliability, a fast-traversing turret, and, most critically, its sheer availability. American doctrine did not envision tank versus tank slugging matches. It was a system of systems. M10 and M18 tank destroyers were meant to be the primary answer to enemy armor. P-47, Thunderbolt fighter bombers, the famed Jabos, were on call to provide devastating air support, and coordinated artillery, particularly the 105mm howitzers of the division's armored field artillery battalions, could blanket enemy positions with high explosives, breaking up attacks before they even began. The American strategy was one of overwhelming integrated firepower and maneuver. Facing them was a hastily conceived German counteroffensive. Stung by the Third Army's rapid advance, Hitler had personally ordered the 5th Panzer Army, under General Hasso von Manteuffel, to strike the 4th Armored Division's exposed southern flank and cut it off. To carry this out, 2 newly formed units, the 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades, were dispatched. These were not the veteran panzer divisions of 1941. They were emergency formations, filled with a mix of raw recruits and hardened veterans pulled from other fronts. Their training was rushed, and they lacked sufficient infantry and reconnaissance elements. What they did have was technological superiority. Each brigade was equipped with a battalion of Panzer V Panthers and a battalion of Panzer Fus. The Panther Osfer G was on paper the finest medium tank of the war. Its 70-ton frame was protected by 80 mm of excellently sloped frontal armor, making it virtually immune to the Sherman's 75 mm gun beyond point-blank range. Its 7.5 cm Rakuki-42 L70 gun was a marvel of German engineering, capable of punching through a Sherman's frontal plate from 1,500 meters. The German plan was simple and brutal. Use the Panther's superior range and firepower to smash the American spearhead from a distance, relying on the Lorraine fog to mask their approach and negate the ever-present threat of Allied air power. They expected to face inferior tanks manned by inexperienced crews, and they anticipated a swift, decisive victory. The stage was set for a classic confrontation, German quality versus American quantity. But the equation was far more complex than that. Inside the turret of Davy Jones, the world shrinks to a space no larger than a family car's interior, but filled with the grim machinery of war. For Sergeant Frank Miller, the tank commander, the world is the 360-degree view through his vision cupola. For the gunner, it's the narrow, magnified image in his periscope. For Jack Wilson, the loader, it's the cramped space between the gun breech and the ammunition racks. The 5-man crew operates in a state of enforced intimacy, their survival wholly dependent on one another's competence. The preparation before an operation is a practiced ritual, a liturgy against fear. The driver checks the fuel and oil. The gunner calibrates his sights. The assistant driver, bow gunner, cleans the .30 caliber machine gun. Jack and the gunner carefully stow the ammunition, a mix of 75 mm rounds, M48 high explosive for soft targets, M61 armor-piercing capped for tanks. They know the M61 is their only real hope against a Panther, and even then, they'd need a side shot. A flank shot, the instructors had drilled into them. Don't ever engage a Panther from the front. Ever. The fear is a constant low-grade hum beneath the surface of training and bravado. It's the chilling stories passed down from the crews who fought in Normandy's Bocage country. Tales of Shermans brewed up in an instant, their crews incinerated by a single, unseen shot. The men cope in different ways. Some crack jokes, their laughter a little too loud in the confined space. Some retreat into a quiet, focused intensity. Jack focuses on the mechanics of his job. Grab the correct shell, shove it into the breech, feel the solid clunk as it seats, slam the lever shut, and yell, "Up!" to the gunner. In the heat of battle, there is no time for fear, only for the fluid, violent muscle memory of the drill. Anticipation is a tightening in the gut. The waiting is the worst part. Waiting for the order to advance. Waiting for the fog to lift. Waiting for the first muzzle flash in the distance. The men of the 4th Armored Division were confident, but not arrogant. They had seen what happened to overconfidence. They trusted their leadership, particularly General Wood, whom they called Tiger Jack. They trusted their NCOs, men like Sergeant Miller, who had been with the division since its activation. Most of all, they trusted each other. They knew their Sherman wasn't the best tank in the world, but it was their tank. It was reliable. It was fast, and there were a lot of them. Their doctrine wasn't about having the best tank. It was about having the best team. The plan was always the same. Find the enemy, fix them in place, and then swarm them from all sides. Use speed as armor. Use numbers as a weapon. They didn't have to be better than a Panther. They just had to be smarter, faster, and more numerous. From the commander's hatch of his Panzer V Panther, Oberleutnant Klaus Richter of the 113th Panzer Brigade surveyed the same impenetrable fog, but with a profoundly different perspective. Richter was a veteran of the Eastern Front, a man who had witnessed the full fury of the Red Army and survived. He held a deep respect for the Soviet T-34, but for the American M4 Sherman, he felt only a professional contempt. In German Panzer circles, the Sherman was a joke, albeit a dangerous one. They referred to it as the Tommy Cooker, or more famously, the Ronson. Its thin vertical armor and gasoline engine were seen as fatal design flaws. German intelligence reports and after-action accounts confirmed that the Panther's 7.5 centimeters KWK-42 gun could easily destroy a Sherman at ranges where the American tank was completely harmless. Richter had studied the schematics. He knew exactly where to place a shot, center mass on the hull or turret, to guarantee a catastrophic kill. His confidence was not personal arrogance. It was a deep-seated belief in the supremacy of German engineering and tactical doctrine. The Panzerlied was not just a song. It was a creed. German Panzer tactics emphasized the principle of the decisive engagement, Kesselschlacht, using technologically superior machines to achieve victory through skill and firepower, not brute force. Richter and his fellow commanders expected to encounter tactically naive American units who would charge headlong into their prepared fields of fire. They believed the Americans relied on clumsy, massed frontal assaults and were incapable of sophisticated maneuver. The plan for the Ericourt counterattack was built on this assumption. The fog, a nuisance to the Americans, was a gift to the Germans. It would shield their advance from the feared Allied fighter bombers, allowing their Panthers to close with the enemy undetected and begin their slaughter at optimal range. Richter envisioned a classic Panzer assault, a swift, powerful thrust that would shatter the American lines. He expected high kill ratios, perhaps 5-to-1 or even higher. He and his men were the professional hunters, armed with sniper rifles, preparing to ambush an enemy armed with shotguns. There was, however, a nagging concern in the back of his mind. While one Sherman was no threat, the intelligence reports spoke of their astonishing numbers. The Americans seemed to be able to replace their losses with an almost supernatural speed. This was the source of a quiet, unspoken anxiety. A victory where they destroyed 10 Shermans for the loss of 2 Panthers was a tactical masterpiece, but a strategic loss. Their new Panther tanks were precious, complex machines. A damaged transmission could take weeks to repair. A lost tank was, for all intents and purposes, irreplaceable. Theirs was a fragile force of finely crafted glass hammers. They planned to win through a single perfect strike. They had no contingency for a prolonged attritional fight. They had no answer for an enemy who could afford to lose. The battle began not with a grand charge, but as a series of sharp, brutal, and confused encounters in the mist. As the Panthers and Panzer IVs of the 113th Panzer Brigade rumbled forward towards the village of Réchicourt-la-Petite, they stumbled directly into the assembly area of the 4th Armored Divisions. Combat Command A, the hunter, had walked into the lion's den. The first shots were fired by American reconnaissance units and M18 Hellcat tank destroyers, whose crews used their incredible speed to engage and then quickly relocate, acting as a screen. The German commanders, blinded by the fog and lacking their own dedicated recon, were disoriented. They were fighting phantoms. Corporal Jack Wilson's tank, Davy Jones, was part of a company ordered to a small ridge overlooking a shallow valley. The fog swirled, offering fleeting glimpses of the fields below. Sergeant Miller, glued to his binoculars, spotted them first. 3 monolithic shapes, their long guns menacing even as silhouettes, moving slowly across their front. "Panthers! Gunner, traverse right. Sabot, target, lead tank." The command was sharp, precise. The 76-meter gun on this newer M4A3E8 model was a welcome upgrade. Jack didn't have Sabot rounds yet, but he slammed a standard armor-piercing shell into the breech. "Up!" the gunner fired. The tank rocked with the recoil, the turret filling with the smell of cordite. The shell streaked towards the lead Panther and ricocheted off its thick frontal glacis with a brilliant flash of sparks, a harmless firefly in the gloom. The Panther's turret began to turn, slowly, deliberately, like the head of some great beast. Its long gun was searching for them. "Driver, back up! Now!" Miller screamed. The Sherman lurched backward, disappearing behind the crest of the ridge just as a high-velocity German shell ripped through the air where they had been moments before, impacting the ground with a deafening explosion that showered them with dirt. This was the American doctrine in action. It was not a duel. It was a dance of death. While Miller's tank drew the Panther's attention, 2 other Shermans in his platoon, positioned hundreds of yards to the left, had a clear shot at the Panther's exposed side armor. Their 75mm guns fired in quick succession. The round struck the thinner armor plate just above the tracks. 1, then 2 plumes of smoke erupted from the German behemoth. It shuddered to a halt, its cannon pointing uselessly at the sky. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out. The Germans, accustomed to fighting from static long-range positions, were flummoxed by the Americans' fluid shoot-and-scoot tactics. Shermans refused to engage head-on. They used terrain, smoke shells, and coordinated movement to create flanking shots. When a Sherman was hit, the rest of its platoon would immediately focus fire on the attacker, overwhelming it from multiple directions. And then there was the artillery. American observers called in fire missions with terrifying speed and accuracy. Entire columns of German tanks and half-tracks were caught in the open by relentless bombardments of 105mm shells, shattering their formations and their morale before they could even see an American tank. The symphony of fire was not just from the tanks. It was from the sky, from the hills, from everywhere at once. The German commanders, like Oberleutnant Richter, found themselves in a tactical nightmare. Their superior machines were being systematically dismantled, not by superior technology, but by superior coordination and an unnerving abundance of targets. For every Sherman they managed to knock out, two more seemed to appear out of the mist, firing from unexpected angles. The central, unexpected outcome of Ericourt, and indeed, the entire Sherman versus Panther debate, was the triumph of logistics and doctrine over individual quality. The German fear was not of a single Sherman. It was the fear of the next Sherman, and the one after that. A Panther commander might destroy an American tank and feel a surge of victory, but his engagement was far from over. As his loader fumbled with the heavy 8.8 kilo shell, the surviving Shermans of the American platoon were already repositioning, communicating over their radios, and directing artillery. The Panther's turret, slowed by a hydraulic traverse, couldn't track multiple fast-moving targets effectively. While it focused on one threat, another would score a disabling shot on its tracks or engine compartment. A disabled Panther was a mission kill. A disabled Sherman was a temporary problem. This is where the true endless stream became apparent. At night, under the cover of darkness, the U.S. Army's ordnance and recovery units would move onto the battlefield. These unsung heroes would tow damaged Shermans, even those that had been heavily hit or burned out, back to rear area depots. There, teams of mechanics would work miracles. A Sherman, knocked out of action on Tuesday, could have a new engine, a new gun, and a fresh crew and be back on the front line by Friday. The tank was designed for this. Its parts were standardized and mass-produced. Its systems were relatively simple to repair. For the Germans, the situation was the polar opposite. The Panther was a complex, over-engineered machine. A breakdown of its temperamental interleaved road wheels or its Maybach engine required specialized equipment and weeks of work. Spare parts were scarce. A Panther lost at Ericourt was lost to the German war effort forever. The Americans were fighting a war of replacement. The Germans were fighting a war of preservation. This fundamental asymmetry meant that American commanders could be aggressive, they could take risks, and they could sustain losses that would have crippled a German unit. Patton's Third Army lost over 200 tanks during the Lorraine campaign, a staggering number. But during the same period, they received over 600 replacements. The stream was truly endless, flowing directly from the factories of Detroit to the battlefields of France. The Germans were bleeding out, one irreplaceable tank at a time. For the German soldier, the psychological impact of this reality was devastating. A Panzer crewman's morale was built upon a foundation of technological supremacy and elite training. This was the bedrock of his fighting spirit. At Ericourt, that foundation cracked and then crumbled. Imagine Oberleutnant Richter's perspective after a day of fighting. His unit has advanced, destroyed a half-dozen Shermans, and achieved its objective on the map. But he has lost 2 Panthers to flanking fire and a third to an artillery strike. His remaining tanks are low on fuel and ammunition. His men are exhausted. The next morning, as the fog clears, he looks out across the valley. He doesn't see a shattered and retreating enemy. He sees a new line of Shermans, fully armed and fueled, holding the same ridge they held yesterday. The losses have been replaced overnight. His have not. This created a profound sense of futility, a feeling akin to drowning. Every effort, every victory was erased by the enemy's seemingly infinite ability to absorb punishment and regenerate. The constant threat was not just from tanks, but from the ever-present fighter bombers. The moment the skies cleared, the P-47s would appear, circling like hawks before diving with rockets and 50-caliber machine guns, turning German columns into flaming wreckage. The German soldier felt naked, exposed, and hunted from every direction. The confidence of the panzer crews curdled into a grim, fatalistic resolve. They fought on, often with incredible bravery and skill, but the hope of a decisive victory was gone. It was replaced by the knowledge that they were engaged in a hopeless holding action against an industrial tidal wave. The name Sherman ceased to be a joke. It became the symbol of this inexorable, grinding force. It represented the factory worker in Detroit, the logistics officer at the port of Cherbourg, the mechanic in the field depot. The fear was not of the tank itself, but of the entire system that put it, and thousands like it, into the field. For the American GIs, the effect was the inverse. While no tanker ever felt invincible in a Sherman, he felt he was part of an invincible army. He knew that if his tank was knocked out, another would take its place. He knew that artillery and air support were just a radio call away. This bred a particular kind of confidence, not in the infallibility of their equipment, but in the overwhelming power of their combined arms team and the industrial might of their nation. It allowed them to endure horrific losses and continue to press the attack, secure in the knowledge that no matter how many tanks they lost today, there would always be more tomorrow. The Battle of Aricourt ended in a stunning and decisive American victory. Over the course of a week, the U.S. 4th Armored Division and its supporting elements destroyed approximately 262 German tanks and assault guns. The 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades were effectively annihilated as fighting formations. American losses, while significant, were a fraction of the Germans. Around 60 tanks, many of which were later recovered and repaired. The German counteroffensive to sever Patton's spearhead had been utterly crushed. The broader impact of the battle, and the Sherman's role in it, sent a clear message to the German High Command. The war on the Western Front would not be won by small numbers of wonder weapons. The Panther and the Tiger were formidable fortresses, but they could be isolated, surrounded, and destroyed by a flexible, combined arms doctrine backed by overwhelming material superiority. Aricourt proved that the American way of war, fast-moving, adaptable, and prodigiously supplied, could defeat the German way of war, which had become increasingly rigid and reliant on technological silver bullets. The true legacy of the M4 Sherman was not that it was the best tank of the war. It wasn't. Its legacy is that it was the right tank for the war the United States chose to fight. It was a reliable, adaptable, and mass-producible weapon that could be shipped across an ocean in vast quantities and maintained easily in the field. It was the physical embodiment of the arsenal of democracy. While Germany produced around 6,000 Panthers during the entire war, the United States produced nearly 50,000 Sherman tanks of all variants. That number is the key. The fear Germany felt was not of a 30-ton tank with a 75mm gun. It was the fear of an assembly line that operated 24 hours a day. It was the fear of a nation that could build tanks faster than Germany could destroy them. The endless stream of Shermans that rolled across the fields of France was more than just an armored formation. It was a visible, tangible representation of a war of production and attrition that Germany had lost long before the first shot was fired at Aricourt. Each Sherman, crewed by men like Corporal Jack Wilson, was a promise that no matter how skillfully or bravely the German soldier fought, there would always be another tank coming over the next hill, and another, until the end.